Hello, everyone. I'm coming to you live from one of the four elementary book rooms in my school district and wanted to do a brief video recapping the wonderful discussion we had from week 2. I hope you are all surviving well into September. Um, I'm feeling a lot of your pain as I'm sitting here cutting out a lot of Teachers College snap words and vowel charts, and I'm making kits for my teachers. I got um, one of those famous Michaels um, kits to help organize everything. And it feels like just when you are finally in the groove and you're responding to emails and getting everything going and everything's finally taking off, it never fails, then it's time for your annual bloodborne pathogen online test. Am I right? Anyway, I'd love to show you around the book room a little bit at the end of this brief discussion because I think there's some cool things in here that you might find interesting. First of all, thank you so much for such a wonderful discussion this week. Obviously, this text moved a lot of you, it caused you to do some deep thinking about literacy and your practices, so I'm really glad that you got a lot out of that. I'd like to recap some major themes that I was seeing in our discussion. For me, the big takeaway I have from one of the big takeaways I have whenever I read this chapter is that I don't understand what's the rush in moving kids up a level. I hear what you're saying, the pressure to show growth and to be able to report to parents that a student is on level, but honestly, I think we can take our time at levels and see what kids can really do in terms of depth instead of just speeding through. And you also all mentioned taking into account all the information that you have on a whole child. They're not just a running record. We want to triangulate, that famous word, triangulate some data. In my district, we look at spelling inventories, MAP scores, and running records. And we look to see if they all talk to each other and make sense. If one of them sticks out, that's when it's time to ask a question and do some digging. We also really heavily look at conferring notes to determine whether something makes sense or is off kilter a little bit. Conferring is very big in my district. I really appreciate that Megan brought up bands of text complexity. We will talk more about that on our face-to-face day, but that's huge. A student isn't a level M, they are reading in the KLM band. They're not a level O, they're reading in the NOPQ band. And all of the books in NOPQ have similar strategies that they have similar features in terms of text and similar strategies that are required from the reader. What will differ is the level of text complexity in terms of vocabulary and sentence structure, etc. Or maybe how often you need to utilize those strategies within a text, the length of the text, but still the concept of a band remains. Please, please, please do not use running record information to hold students back from reading books at levels that you think might be beyond their abilities. That's too hard for them. That's a level beyond their abilities. We don't want to think like that. As Joelle pointed out, there are many different variables besides leveling that affect comprehension. There's choice, interest, prior knowledge, motivation, all of these play a role. Of course, you will have the ultimate say as the teacher, taking all of those things into account, but don't automatically write off a text that a student is interested in just because you think it might be too hard for them. Take into account some other factors before you help guide them into making that decision. And one rule that I have is that I dictate what text students read in strategy groups. I help them make just right book choices for their book bins, but in the library, all hands are off. They get to pick whatever they want to read from the library. That is a free zone where it's fully their choice. And there's a lot of reasons behind that. First of all, we can't dictate everything they read all the time, but also we don't know what the purpose of them checking that book out might be. For instance, they might be wanting to take it home to read it to someone or have it read to them or to share it with their sibling. Sorry about the bell, it's about to happen. So, uh, the sense I'm getting from you all is I read this Vanessa story, it talked to me on deep levels, but what am I supposed to do with this information? Now my faith in running records is meager at best. Amanda said, so kind of like, what is the point of a running record then if they are not giving us an accurate picture of students as readers? My response to that is it depends on the type of running record you're giving. We need to keep in mind there are benchmark running records, which I think 100% you were talking about that's what Saravello's talking about, and that's what you were all talking about in the discussion. You were talking about benchmark running records, Teachers College, F&P. But we need to keep in mind there's also informals, and in my district at least, those are almost more important than the benchmark running records. Informal running records are running records done with a student's book that they are currently in, and they give us insights into how students are actually applying the strategies we teach them to the text they're reading. They let us know when a student is ready for a benchmark. Kirsten Eckert was like, oh my gosh, we give them quarterly. And I was like, whoa, doggy, that's a lot of benchmarks. You're going to burn through them all at that point. How do you know a kid's ready for a benchmark? Not just because the calendar said so. Sometimes, especially the students I support with IEPs who develop much slower than a typical expected pace, they're not ready for a benchmark. And I'm just going to burn through them while I'm working with them on a strategy. So I think quarterly is a lot. Also, informal running records help me isolate one aspect of reading that I want to look at. So I can just have a student reading to me and checking for accuracy and decoding, or I can just be focusing on comprehension. It depends on what my goal is for that student and what we're working on. So I think informals have a lot of value and a lot of teacher input than just our conversation about benchmark running records. And the informals, as I mentioned, are in the text the student's actually reading. On our face-to-face day, we'll talk about that a lot more. I will give you some Teachers College and some F&P tools for using informal running records in your toolkits. Somebody said, can I even have faith in running records? Well, we also need to talk about rigor and accuracy of our benchmark running records. You guys are talking about Teachers College and Fontes and Pinnell running records and how a level is a level and they're supposed to all match, but sometimes they don't, especially because F&P just came out with new, more rigorous protocols, and Teachers College offers fiction protocols, but not nonfiction protocols. Teachers College has an increased level of rigor than what is typically expected. Personally, you can take all that into account and just remember, I have faith in triangulating that benchmark with what I'm seeing in the informal running records, what I'm actually seeing my students apply to their authentic texts. So, how can I truly know where my students are at? I don't have time for full book assessments. I can't sit and read all of my students' books and write them all chapter questions like Jennifer Saravello did for Vanessa. That's true. So my suggestions are to teach students to track their reading with stickies, stop and jot. I know that's a workshop concept, especially heavy in Teachers College, but that can apply to all curriculums. We track our thinking in our book, we stop and jot, we take notes. It helps us keep track of those complex, longer texts. Also, regular conferring is key. I think you should be conferring with students at once a week, once every other week if possible, especially students who have higher needs. Regular conferring is absolutely key, and consulting with those bands of text complexity and the strategies that go along with them. So what are you seeing consistently and independently in what students are doing? Remember that comprehension also is, I don't know if people will want to debate me on this, but I think it's tied to development personally. Some students need to grow and mature more before they're ready to expand some of their comprehension strategies. I feel like their brains are like 80 laptops and a server all trying to boot up at once until they're all talking to each other, and that can take years where some parts boot up first and then other parts, but they're not talking to each other yet, and their brains are making all these connections, and sometimes they just need to grow. They need some time before they can develop strategies. It's not something we can force on them, no matter how amazing our instruction is. That's my personal opinion. In conclusion, I did not share this text with you because I wanted to shake your confidence in running records, but I wanted you to remember that running records have strengths and limitations, harkening back to our 746 class for those of you that we took that together. Running records are an assessment tool. Every tool has strengths and limitations, and a tool is only as good as its administrator and your analysis of the results. So, you as literacy leaders can help guide others' thinking in understanding what role running records play in our instruction and our understanding of students. So, okay, before I end this epically long, it's getting long video, I want to show you around my book room because I'm really proud. I want to show you some things. First of all, um, let's just pick a level. So we have level I here, and you know how you have to dig through all these baggies and you're trying to find the one book that's going to meet your strategy needs? We decided to pull one book out of every baggie and make a browsing bin. So in this browsing bin, I can flip through and find the book that I like. Here, this will be great for my class. I can open it and look at it, number 13, and I go ahead and I find the baggie that goes with it. Isn't that awesome? And then all the yellow books are fiction and all the white books are nonfiction. So we're sharing that with our staff tomorrow. We're going to have, or Wednesday, we're going to have a staff development with books, brownies, and bubbly, not champagne, like the bubbly sparkling water. Anyway, I hope you all have a great week, not filled with bloodborne pathogen quizzes that take up all of your time and countless emails. I will see you all online. Bye.